There are pawn and games on chess.com. How can you access it? Well, there are these thingies on the side. You can see, and if you go to learn, and then you go to endgames, you go there, and then there are checkmate, pawn, minor piece, rook, queen, and imbalance endgames. We will start with the pawn endgames, and pawn endgames I think are more important than minor piece endgames, rook endgames, queen endgames. They are all very important, but probably the most important is the pawn endgame, because almost every endgame can be simplified into a pawn endgame. Therefore, you need to know your pawn endgames more than other endgames. So yeah, we will do these pawn endgames here, and I will start with the winning pawn, king and pawn endgames, because this is the start. By the way, today's daily Hungarian is gyalog, which means pawn in Hungarian. All right, so let's start in the very beginning. We have what you need to understand in the very beginning is opposition. What is opposition? When the kings are on the same file and they are on the same color. This is how I like to explain it. Some will tell you that when the kings are on the same file and then there is uneven, there is an odd number of squares between the kings. And that also makes sense, but I think it's easier to remember same file, same color. So even if the king is here, this is still opposition. Just that's a distant opposition. Now, right now, we don't need a distant opposition. Let's start with the normal opposition. So our kings are on the same file, same color. So why is it so important? It's such a fancy term, Fruzsi, yes. But why the heck is it important? Chess players like to name everything, yes, but opposition actually is crazy important, because think about it this way, the two kings cannot really advance or get closer to each other, right? Because that's one of the rules of chess, right? They cannot step next to each other. So therefore, there is a wall between these two kings, and no one can pass that. Now, why is it so bad, right? At least for the attacker. Well, if you think about it, the king should be able to advance, right? The king would like to enter this territory here, but this other king doesn't let him, right? That's a bad thing. While for the defender, opposition is important for the same reason, to keep the opponent's king away. So the opponent's king cannot enter. Now you could ask me, okay, but why is it so important? I just start pushing the pawn, push. Opponent's king will move away, and then I will be able to promote my pawn. Maybe under 500 level, yes. But if someone has a little understanding of pawn endgames, how to defend, then no. So another rule is your king must go first. The king should be in front of the pawn. I explained this before, I think, on stream, that if you think about it this way, it will be a weird analogy, but let's say the king is the dad, the pawn is the child. Well, which dad would push the pawn first, right? The child first. Okay. Let's see, if there is some danger, you will protect me, my child. There is nothing to worry about. Don't worry, I will just push you first, and if there is a monster that comes out of the woods, they will find you first and I will be safe. Yes, could be, but hopefully most dads would go first and make sure that the territory is safe, right? So for same reasons, the king should go first, because the king has to make sure that it's safe for the pawn to go first. And if we come back to opposition a little bit, then we have to talk about something else. So this is opposition, right? We said that before. And whoever has to move out of this position has a little disadvantage. I'm not saying they are losing, not necessarily losing, but they have a little disadvantage. So first we push the pawn and we take the opposition back, right? Because now black has to move out of the opposition. It doesn't matter where they go, really. There is a little difference between h8 and f8, but now we won't get into that. Let's start with the basics. So now the opponent's king went out of our way. That means we can in with our king. You could say, but why don't we take the opposition? Because we are the attackers. We need the opposition. So once our opponent gets out of the way, we can enter. We don't have to take the opposition because it's always such a fancy thing. No, we are the attackers and we want to enter. So, it's like if you imagine two people, it happened to you for sure when you wanted to enter someone and someone wanted to exit and you were in front of each other and you moved at the same direction all the time. It for sure happened to me. So the thing is similar. The attacker is the one who grabs the other person, puts them away so they can enter. And the defender is the one who wants to keep this going. As the attacker, we grab the opponent's king, we put them away so we can enter. Probably the computer thinks they can survive better if they run away because it will be harder to checkmate. Now we achieved what we wanted. We are defending all these squares and our pawn can finally go and become a queen. First, remember, having the opposition is power. You want to have the opposition. What is opposition? When you are on the same file, same color. Okay, this is one rule. Second thing, it's always the king that goes first. Very rarely the pawn, but I would say always bring the king first. Probably if you know when to push the pawn first and you are already more advanced. But for now, bring the king closer. The third thing is this opposition doesn't matter that much when your king and your pawn has already crossed the half line. So when you cross the half line, the opposition does not matter that much because I will show you why. So now it's black who has the opposition, right? And we could be sad and our opponent offers a draw and we sadly shake hands with them. Absolutely not. We just move away with the king. Now the opponent's king takes the opposition, right? And we cannot do anything about it. I could go to the other direction, but the opponent's king would just follow me. There is no point in doing that, right? I can do nothing. And now is the time when I can finally push this pawn. Since we crossed the half line, this is actually winning. But if the pawn was there and everything was a bit more down, actually, then this would be a draw. So now we push this. And the thing is, king goes under the pawn. And here's the fourth thing you need to remember. You need to reach the 7th or the 2nd rank, the one before the last rank with your pawn without a check. Because if you reach it with a check, then probably for sure it means that this will be a draw if your opponent knows what to do. But if you reach it without a check, now this is what we call a Zugzwang. What does this mean? It's again a fancy word, just players love to name everything. So what is this Zugzwang? Normally, if you're both paying attention and it's not an online game, once you make a move, once I make a move, once you make a move, once I make a move. And it's an amazing thing, right? But sometimes this is actually a bad thing that we are forced to make a move. Because this is what Zugzwang is about. We push this pawn and our opponent has a tough decision, right? Not so tough because there is only one move, but this king will step out of the way and we will be able to get next to the pawn and promote. If they could say, you know what, I'm not in the mood to make a move. You can just take my turn and no problem, you can make a move. And this would be a draw. But they can say that they are forced to make a move, and sometimes that's a bad thing. And this is what Zugzwang is about. So we push this, king gets out, we go there, and now we are finally able to promote. Yeah, so now this is a little bit tougher because our pawn is not, hasn't crossed the half line yet. And now we are basically in a tough position, or most people could be in a tough position. I am not, because I know how to win this one. But hopefully you wouldn't be in a tough position either. So many would start pushing the pawn, would go crazy. Yay, I can push the pawn without any trouble. Let's go. No. If you touch the pawn, it's draw. Do not touch the pawn. So if we come back to the rule, the king goes first, right? So we go back, and actually it doesn't matter where we put the king, but for this you need to understand why not. For now, I would just say take the dam opposition. So we take this dam opposition. This is still an opposition. It's a bit, this is a distant opposition, but this is still an opposition. So distant opposition is actually I found it a bit harder for most of my students because they think it's too far away to make it do anything with opposition, but it is an opposition, because if you think about it, if our opponent advances closer wherever they go, we just take the opposition, right? So if they try to advance, we will be able to take the opposition, and it will result in a close opposition in a way. Okay, now what to do? Our opponent does not advance, and we could say, okay, we take this dumb opposition again, but then we will just follow each other around. Black won't advance, we won't advance. So what the heck to do, right? So here's the thing, and here is another rule. I think this is our 5th rule so far. And there is another rule which I wanted to add. So when you are trying to promote a pawn, this is basically no man's land. We do not step there, because very often when people take the opposition, sometimes they think, okay, I will advance from this side. But no. We only use these, the red ones. Sorry, I picked the wrong color, but we will only step on the red lines here. So the pawn's file, and the one next to it on the right, and the one next to it on the left. We do not walk further, because we don't want to abandon our child, right? Be a good father or mother. Yes, this one is probably one of the trickiest endgames you need to remember, but once you understand how to promote one pawn, you will understand a lot about many endgames already. So do not worry. Yes, here this one is a bit difficult to remember all these rules, but once you know them, you will do very well in most pawn endgames, or in many pawn endgames actually. All right, so what to do here? And here comes another rule. Now we can advance here, and this is not opposition. I am on a dark square and my opponent is on a light square, and my opponent will be able to take the opposition. But if I don't advance and I just take the opposition, I won't be able to advance. So this could be a tough decision, right? But don't worry, because here's another thing to remember. So if you have at least one square between your king and your pawn, at least one square, the more the better, of course, but at least one square, then you can take your opposition back in a smart way. Here we will just push the pawn and say, got you, call the ambulance, but not for me, because I have the opposition in this case. And the opponent will be forced to move out, and then we can just go enter and be happy. But if this pawn was here and it was our turn, we would be pretty much doomed. That would be a drawish endgame, because we won't be able to take the opposition back. You see how important opposition is? It's a gift. So take your opposition. Okay, so we push this. Now black is forced to move out, you see? And no, I don't take the opposition, because what for? I am the one who wants to enter the room. I don't want to follow this situation, where no one can enter, no one can exit. So I just enter. Okay, my opponent goes under the pawn. And now, again, I do not push the pawn. Do not push the pawn. Because I would say first force your opponent to the last rank, to the 8th rank. And then you can start thinking about pushing the pawn. But until then, if it's not necessary, don't push this pawn. So we take this opposition again. Our opponent moves away. And again, we enter. We don't want to keep this going. No, we just enter. Okay, king goes there. Now the king is already on the 8th rank. Since we have two ranks between the king and the pawn, I think we can safely push it. So we push it, king goes there, okay. It's more critical when the king is under our king, because that is a little bit trickier. Here there is nothing to fear. We would have to think maybe a little bit more if the king was there, but still it's not an issue. And again, you see, remember the rule that we have to cross the half line. We cross the half line with the pawn, and now everything should be fine. Our opponent cannot take the opposition, so we are very, very happy. We push that, and our opponent's king is there. And now, again, I want you to be careful in this situation, because the problem is if I mindlessly started pushing this pawn, we would shake hands with a draw, go home, I would sit in the corner and cry, because this would be a draw. But why? Because my opponent again takes the opposition. And you remember what I said about reaching the 7th and 2nd rank? You should do it without a check, which is a bit, it doesn't sound that logical because people love to give checks, right? So it would sound more logical. Yes, and I even reached the 7th or 2nd rank with my pawn with a check, and then everything is magical. But no. You have to reach it without a check, not with a check, because then after that the king will go under the pawn. And you remember what I said about Zugzwang? Now who is in Zugzwang? Not black. We are in Zugzwang. So let's not get into Zugzwang. And if you are not sure, if you are not sure if you should push the pawn or not, I would say taking the opposition is normally a good idea. So if you are not sure, take the opposition. Now the king gets out, and there is nothing to fear anymore. We just go here. We will control the promotional square. We control all these squares, and our pawn can confidently reach the d8 square, and we can promote. Yes, so boom, check. We go here. If the opponent's king was there and we reached it with check, that wouldn't be an issue because we are already controlling that square, right? So now we can just promote. We have a queen. So the point is there are these key squares that travel with the pawn. I mean, once you push the pawn, then these key squares will be pushed here, right? So we push them here. If you push the pawn, then the key squares will be a bit more up. And the point of these key squares is that once you reach any of these key squares, then the position is winning for sure. No matter if your opponent has the opposition or not, it should be winning if you reach these key squares. So this is about the key squares, but you know, it's most of the time winning if you reach these, if you can get in front of the pawn. So what should we do? I would say also maybe another rule is, you know, we are envious people, and if we can't have the opposition, we will always try to not give it to our opponent. That makes sense. So we don't step into willingly oppositions where my opponent can take the opposition and I cannot. Most of the time this is another rule which works very often. Here we need to get closer to the pawn, because if you see, our king is on the no man's land, so we need to bring it closer. We don't have one rank between our pawn and the king, but right now that's not an issue because our opponent's king is a bit far away from our king, so that's a bit tricky. I mean, it's not tricky since our opponent can teleport here, right? If they could now, that would be a draw. We will talk about the draw endgames as well. So we come closer because we have to, right? So our opponent's king is coming closer as well. And again, we do not touch the pawn. They should not walk next to each other because, you know, the monster can attack both of them at the same time. So the king stays in front of the pawn, the dad stays in front of the pawn, protects the child. So we take the opposition calmly. We take it, our opponent's king moves away, and we don't keep taking the opposition. We enter, right? Okay, opponent's king goes there. Do not push the pawn until your opponent has reached the last rank. I would say this is a useful rule, I think. So again, we take the opposition. You could say, I can enter my opponent's position. But you see, you remember I mentioned this is no man's land? Yeah, this is pretty much no man's land, right? If you step there thinking, yeah, I can enter my opponent's position and I can get closer, that's the time when you will be screwed, because the king will come from this point, this side, come here, and you know what? You will lose the poor Johnny on b3. That would be a pity, right? So let's not enter. That's why I said this is no man's land. We do not touch this line, for now at least, until we promote. So we take the opposition again. Our opponent's king moves away, and we enter. Okay, king is there. King is on the last rank. Now I can start pushing the pawn, especially since I have more ranks between the king and the pawn. So I can just push it. King goes there, and I have to be a little bit careful, but now by pushing the pawn, I take the opposition back because my opponent has to get out of it. I have the opposition if my opponent goes out of it. So I just push it, king goes away, and no, I don't push this. Remember, you have to be a little bit careful here. I would say if you are not sure, take the opposition, go there, and now you can just push it. You are controlling all these squares and you should be fine. Ooh, we are on no man's land. This will be nice. So again, I will start using the key squares as just so you understand those a little bit too. So we are far away from the pawn again. We have at least 2 ranks between the pawn. That means if our opponent takes the opposition, then it's not the end of the world, because we will always have this extra move in our pocket to take the opposition back. So these are the key squares, and once we reach these, it doesn't matter whose turn it is, we will be able to win it. So we take this key square. Now our opponents take the opposition, and here they offer a draw. Will you accept it? Well, of course not. Here, what you do is push this pawn just a tiny little bit. You do not push it here, right? The king and the pawn, they do not walk besides each other. No, the pawn is always a little bit behind. So we just push this here. King goes there, and we don't push this, don't touch the pawn. We take the opposition, right? King moves away, and now we will be able to enter here. Again, okay, opponent's king goes there. We do not push the pawn. First, we want them to be on the 8th rank. We take the opposition. King moves away, and there is no need to take the opposition again, because why? What for? We are the attackers. We are the one who want to put the other person away so we can enter the room. We enter the room. Finally, king goes there. King reached the last rank, and now is the time to bring the child closer. When the king is not in front of our king, we don't have to be that careful anymore. We can just keep pushing this. You could say, okay, we take the opposition here just to represent, just to show you what happens in this case. I will play it. But the problem is, we go there and you could say, yes, now I am defending all these squares here and my opponent can come closer. Yes, but once you take the opposition this way on the rank, it doesn't matter that much. You take it from this side, no one cares, because the king will step closer to your pawn, and the poor child is like, Dad, where are you? There is this black king coming close to me and wants to capture me. Could you please come back and save me? And the white king will be forced to come back, and the king goes back, and we will end up in the same situation. So just to show you what happens, you can take this, but there is no point. You just lose tempo. You go there, and the opponent's king comes closer, and now the pawn is like, Dad, I'm scared. I'm alone. I'm caught, please. I'm hungry also. Please help me. So the dad has to come back. And now we are back to the same situation. So there is no point in doing this. Now you can just push the pawn, especially since the king is not in front of our king. We push it, king goes there. And remember, if you can take the opposition, I think it's better to take the opposition than thinking, okay, will this win, will this not win? Just take the opposition, king moves away. You go there, and now you can just push this. One thing I wanted to add to this story, we tried with different pawns how to promote one pawn, right? I would say that all the pawns are winning if you have the right position, except for the rook pawns. They are the rook pawns because they are in front of the rook, right? They are in the starting position. In the close future, we will also talk about other endgames, especially the one with the king against the king and the pawn, and how to draw that. So if that interests you, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and I will see you later. Bye bye!